Welcome back. Alex Wiseman here. We're still discussing the syllabus for CIE 404, Issues and Institutions in International Educational Development. We were talking about some of the different assignments and had just gotten through talking about the participation requirement. And now we're talking about student-led discussion activities. 10% of your grade. It's due whenever it's scheduled. That's depending on when you choose. So depending on the number of students in the class, either individuals or pairs or even small groups of students will be responsible for preparing and leading a discussion on the readings in class. Your classmates will be providing you with some sort of structured feedback on the content, usefulness, and engagement of the discussion activity. So make sure it's informative, make sure it's relevant, make sure it's interesting. It's required that you also write a blog post that complements your discussion activity and post it on CIE404.wordpress.com in this post and updates section, right? You will have an opportunity to post your own thing here. What I recommend you do is that you post the blog rather than a follow-up blog. Think of it as a pre-discussion blog. I would post a blog that outlines what you're going to do for your discussion activity. And let me emphasize that when it says activity, it means activity. It does not mean presentation. It does not mean slideshow. It does not mean long mono tone talk. I get to do all the boring stuff. You guys should do the more interesting activities around the discussion of the readings. And when you're doing that, you are engaging your classmates in a really important activity, because talking about what we're reading, getting the ideas about it together are going to be essential. Right? So a couple things. You have to devise an activity. It has to be relevant to the readings, and there has to be a blog post that I'm going to say precedes it on the website. Okay? We'll talk about this more in class, but just remember that when you are looking at the syllabus now, and when you get to the part where it lists out the actual schedule and the class topics, you'll see days when a discussion leader space is available. Think about which of those days you would like to be the discussion leader, right? Which of those days would you like to be the discussion leader? I would make a decision based on what content is being discussed that week rather than when it is in the semester, but take a look at it either way. We'll be deciding on the first day of class who does what and when. Next, so the big group project for this class is to develop a website. Right? You'll be developing a website with a group, and we will assign groups also on the first or second day week of class. And it's going to go through a couple of iterations. One is the website needs to be relevant to the topic of the class, relevant to issues and institutions in international education development. The way that we've done this in the past is we've looked at what some international organizations that are heavily involved in education are doing, and specifically if they had any competitions or grants or other things that they were awarding, and in what areas they were awarding them. In other words, what were the topics of interest for these organizations. And then we asked students to develop a website that was investigating that issue, that was providing some background on that issue, that was problematizing it, that was looking at ways that the problem might actually be solved, right? So the website proposal is your first attempt at this. It's 10% of your grade. It's due October 16th, and it points out that the culminating assignment for the course is an online public website that will address an important problem of globalization and education equity, because remember, we're talking about poverty reduction and human rights as sort of key elements to our international development and education issue. So to prepare for the final assignment, it requires that you first propose a topic or a theme or a problem to investigate and then present on your website. So I'd like for you to put together a website proposal. It should consist of these 4 sections. First, the problem section. I'd like you to explain what the problem is that your website is going to address. And I'd like you to do that by defining it, by operationalizing it, and by indicating how it might be observed. Now, when I say operationalize, I mean this is akin to indicating how it might be observed. How would you measure it? Right? What is a real-world example of it? What are the units that are involved if we're measuring it? Right? How is it quantitative or qualitative? Is it something that can be analyzed? Right? These are all ways that you can think about operationalization. Next, I'd like for you to have a theory section. I'd like for you to, as a group, to provide an explanation of the main theory that is framing your thinking about the problem and the one or two most important competing theories. So dependency theory is going to be one that will pop up over and over again in your CIE program, and certainly it will make an appearance at some point in this class. But another one that might pop up is also human capital. Human capital theory might be there, right? The idea that we develop individuals so that they have some sort of value in exchange for knowledge and skills. Or we might have, my personal favorite, an institutional theory, or a world culture theory, or many different flavors of theory that could frame how your group is considering the problem. And then recognition of one or two other important competing theories, even if they're not the ones you want to use, you think they're important and they provide an alternative. Next, I'd like for you to have a review and critique. Provide an introduction to either the official policy or the empirical research literature or some sort of documented resistance or response to the problem. In other words, how has this problem been addressed before? A problem might be gender-segregated schooling in the Arabian Gulf countries, right? So, or maybe that's just an issue. Maybe if you're from that region, you don't consider that a problem, right? Because problem is defined by one's own perspective often. So explain how gender-segregated schooling is a part of the official policy of the educational systems there. If there's any empirical research literature that is looking at or documenting or investigating the impact or the effects of gender-segregated schooling. If there's any documented resistance or response, even if it's a favorable response to the problem, those are all going to be important. And then application. Explain how your documented solutions or attempted solutions to the problem are demonstrated or can be demonstrated at a personal level, at a local level, at a national level, and at a global level. And if you feel that there's only one level or that your issue is actually relevant to, or if there are a couple that wouldn't be appropriate, we can discuss that. But think about how real solutions or the idea for solutions could be linked to the problem or issue that you have defined. All right, so that's your website proposal. Let me skip over the midterm essays briefly to talk about the website development and publication and the public presentation. So you're going to have practice website presentations in class on November 6th. That's right at the beginning of November. So you should have enough going with your website by November 6th that you can give a practice presentation. And remember, the website proposal is October 16th. So that gives you, what, like 2.5 weeks or 3 weeks to put together something so that you can do a practice website presentation. You're also going to have your websites do live online on November 20th. All right, so this is roughly a little more than a month later after you've proposed your website that you should have at least a draft of it available live online. Now, if you haven't made a website before, I highly suggest you go to this website that I have listed here. It's for the WordPress.com site. It talks about how you can use WordPress to create a website. If you haven't used a website before, but you've used another type of website development tool that's available online and for free, you're welcome to use that instead. I'm just suggesting WordPress because I think it's easy. So then you'll have your final website presentations on December 4th, and hopefully your websites will also be finalized by December 4th so that you can present them fully in your presentation. So the final product in this class is going to be a website and a presentation based on a topic or theme that is relevant to globalization and education equity, because we know that those are highly relevant to international education and development. These websites will be a semester-long project that are related to the theoretical, empirical, and application-oriented approaches to problems of education, poverty reduction, human rights, and equity worldwide. You can use a WordPress.com free site unless you have another free site that you want to try to use. And we can talk more about this in class, but I want you to have in mind that these are the kinds of issues that I want you to have, that I want you to be thinking about, and that I want you to be preparing for. There are two sites in particular, or there are three sites in particular that I want you to look at. Two in particular, though, I think you're going to want to take a special look at. So this bottom one, this Child Soldier Crisis, this is the oldest of these three websites, created by a class that I taught a couple of years ago. Looks at literally the problem of child soldiers worldwide, and I think they do a really nice job. So check out how they developed their site. But these two, the MOOCs for Teacher Training and the Education Without Teachers sites, these are going to be very important for you. These are going to be, I think you could even use each of these as examples as you develop your own. Now they take different approaches. This one of these takes a very sort of detailed approach, and the other one takes a much more outline approach. Both of them have to have freestanding meaning, though. In other words, when you develop these websites, you're not going to be around to talk to and explain every part to everyone who comes across them, right? Because they're public, they're online. Anywhere in the world, you can look at these. So it has to give enough information that you can understand it if you're just looking at it on your own. But there is a difference in the amount of information that you can or should use. So take a look at both of those. Take a look at the different sections that are involved. Those will be similar to the sections that I will require you to have on your final websites, and we'll be talking more about that in class. Okay, the last thing I want to do is talk about the individual midterm essays that are due October 23rd. They're worth 30% of your grade. And you already know the questions. Congratulations. You know what your questions are for your midterm essays that are due October 23rd. One is development aid for education working, and explain. And two, do IGOs and INGOs, that's international governmental organizations and international non-governmental organizations, construct a world culture of education? Explain. Those are your questions. I'm not going to give you different questions. I'm not going to change the questions. That's it. Those are the ones. You know them now. All right? So your answers to these midterm essays should reflect your own thinking and views about the reading assignments and the class discussions. Your answers have to be written independently. There's no collaboration allowed on the answers. And the midterm essays must each be constructed to include the following elements and sections. They have to have a thesis statement and introduction. They have to have a background and context section. They have to have a theory and conceptual framework section. They have to have an evidence, explanation, and critique section. And they have to have an application implications for international educational development section. Take a look at what the descriptions are for each of these sections, and be aware that you are going to have to include each of these sections in the answers to each of these questions. All right? And I'd like for you to actually use section headings so that I know when you're going from one section to the next. Let me remind you that there are some details about the actual written product that I'm requiring. Each of the essays must be 5,000 words or less, including references. You have a word count thing on your word processor. Make sure they're 5,000 words or less total. Both essays should be typed and single-spaced. I recommend using 12-point font. All materials must be handed in no later than the beginning of class or the specified time on the due dates. In this case, it's before class starts on October 23rd. All right? That is it. Ta-da! Make sure that you're using references to the reading assignments and the class discussions. It's very important. This is how you're demonstrating that you understand the theoretical and the conceptual and the empirical literature that we've been talking about. All right, I'll come back in a second and talk about text and the reading schedule.